All right. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome. It is now 7 p.m. and we are on live with Phil Boyte. It's our very first ever CADA online book chat. My name is Ron Ippolito. I'm the Area E Coordinator representing Los Angeles County. And I also serve on the CADA State Board as a result of that. And so we're here tonight with Phil Boyte. Phil is a speaker, is the author of, and I've got the book right here, School Culture by Design. And I started reading this book back, gosh, I got it right after the CADA convention back in the spring. And I love it. And it speaks to where my heart is, and I think where we all are as educators. So Phil, welcome. Good evening.
Thanks, Ron.
And so Phil, I think I want to start by just asking you a couple of questions about, first of all, what was your inspiration for the book? I know you talk about it a little bit at the beginning, but what was your inspiration, and what, I guess, not your credentials, what makes you qualified to write this book, Phil? But rather, what are the experiences that led you to write this book?
Well, it was a fun book to write because after 30 years of running around the country doing school assemblies, staff development days, I did dozens of link crew and web trainings where I sat meal after meal with educators, superintendents, teachers, first year, 20-year teachers, and just hearing their stories. And then about 2 years ago, I happened to be at a conference where I heard a speaker, just a workshop speaker, about 20 of us there, say something about the difference between culture and climate at their school. And I would always use those words interchangeably. And I realized probably for the first time how different they were. And so I went on this search of, okay, what defines school culture? And just started hearing amazing conversations. So said, hey, people need to hear this. And so if you read the book, you'll realize it's a lot of stories from schools that are doing amazing things around culture. So that's why I thought, I have an audience, folks that know me around the world. Why not share these great things they may never hear in any other way except to pick up a book that you can read in about 60, maybe 90 minutes.
Well, Phil, I was just realizing, and thank you for that. Before we go any further, if you have any questions for Phil, anything that you want to share, we are on, this is our online chat right here. It's todaysmeet.com/bookchat, todaysmeet.com/bookchat. And so if you have anything that you want to share, even if you're just my wife and you just want to let me know, hello, Heather, you just want to let me know, make sure that this is working. I think it is. This is, I use Today's Meet for other chat rooms as well when I've done other chats, technology chats and things like that. And I find that it's really helpful as kind of a back channel. So again, we're on todaysmeet.com/bookchat if you want to join us. All right, so Phil, my next question for you, you talk at the beginning of the book, and this is something that, one of many things that spoke to me. You talked about assuming a culture of best intent. So wanted you to talk about kind of where did this idea come from, and what does this mean to you, and what should this mean for us in our schools, assuming a culture of best intent?
Yeah, I tell a story in the book of visiting a high school in Colorado. It just felt great. And I asked the assistant principal, and she shared this amazing story about their inaugural principal writing the words "assume the best intent" on the whiteboard and sitting down, letting it soak in. And they had a great conversation about what would happen to the culture of their school if they assumed the best intent of one another. And she said that was about 5 years ago, and it's really resonated with us. And I think that we're humans, and we have a tendency at times to assume whatever we want about our colleagues, about students, about parents coming in. And we get to make that choice. And oftentimes we assume something, and then later we hear the story and we're like, wow, okay, now the whole picture comes together. And too many times, even in my personal experience, I've assumed the worst, or I've assumed something less than the best. And then later I hear the story and go, oh, I would have treated that person, that situation so different had I just assumed the best and trusted them. And I think as I share that in presentations now, I see a lot of nods for both reasons, for people who already have that core value and for people who know they want that core value, but they haven't always had it in the past.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things I think sometimes we tend to, and this is not just in education, but just kind of in life in general, we tend to take slights personally, or we feel like if someone is not giving us their best, whether it is a colleague or whether it's a student or whoever it is, sometimes we tend to think, oh, they're reacting to me, or it's something that I'm doing wrong, or they don't like me or whatever. And it's when you take that approach of always assuming best intent, then you stop making it personal and realize that you try to figure out, more of their story. What's going on in their life, and what is it that is, maybe 99.9% of the time, there's a reason why this is happening, or they're treating me this way, and it has nothing to do with me, and it has everything to do with what is going on in their life.
Yeah, I think a great way to practice it in cars, because on the road we see so many crazy things and we assume that person's an idiot or whatever. What do we say? The person who's going too fast, an idiot. The person who's driving too slow, what's wrong with them if they're not doing it perfect? And so for me to practice the assume the best intent, that person's in a hurry because of an emergency, or that person's slow because they're scared right now. And so trying to have a capacity, that's just such an easy way to do it, because it happens to all of us almost every day. And then to maybe transfer that core value into our day-to-day work and life on campus.
Phil, you mentioned throughout the book, you mentioned how school culture is critical, and you addressed that early on. Yet, why do you think that sometimes our school leaders, our administrators, tend to overlook the importance of school culture?
Well, one thing is it's really hard to measure, and it goes back to Edward Deming, who came out of the 60s, I believe, talking about total quality management. And we as a culture have become fascinated with that, because if it's not measurable, it doesn't count, is what we've heard some people say. And we can all walk across the school campus and we can feel the difference. We can walk into a faculty meeting and feel the difference. And we know the difference between great, good, and struggling. We've even been around toxic culture, some of us. And I always say this, I think the Kool-Aid that we've been drinking in education for about 15 years is data drives everything. And recently, a lot of us have heard, let's improve instruction. But if you really dig deep, a lot of people, instruction increase data. Those are important. But I think there's a third leg on the stool, and that means culture. Because anybody who's walked into a class and a teacher's a magician, you're like, what in the world's going on? They've spent time on culture. And they've done some work around relationships between them and the student. They've done work on relationships between the students and the students. So there's a collegiality in that classroom that people are like, this just feels good. I want to be here. Well, when I want to be here, learning comes easy after that, because I can be vulnerable. I can take some risks. But I think it goes back to, if it's not measurable, then how do we know if it's good or bad? And if things have been data driven for so long, and every time I say that, I see anybody, teachers, administrators, nodding, you're right. We have been looking at the scoreboard pretty hard. I don't know that there's a space on the scoreboard for culture. And yet now I think in the last year or two, people are starting to go, yeah, that's important. Question is, how do we get there?
And do we see, have you in your research or in your personal experience, have you visited schools where, even though the test scores, I guess my question is, have you visited places where they just know that improvement in school culture has therefore led to the improvement in the test scores in that data that you're talking about?
I don't have any specifics. We can go through and find some. You take a look at a Robert Louis Stevenson, one of the high-profile schools in the country, 4,500 kids outside of Chicago, and everybody goes and visits them and says, hey, what are you doing right? They've got the PLCs going. I've worked with them the last 5 years, and they have a full-time activities program. They have 5 or 6 people who are focused on school culture and climate. They believe that matters. And yet you look at their scores, parents beg for their kids to get into that school. Why else would you have a school of 4,500? Why wouldn't they break that up and say, I have 2 schools of 2,200? Because parents are like, no, 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 we want our kids there because there's great things happening. You take a look at a school like Vita down in San Diego. I don't know what the latest stats are, but 3 years ago, they closed the school. They said Washington Junior High School or middle school in Vista, California is done. They're so upside down. So they brought in Eric Chagala, who said, wait a minute, relationships matter. Let's focus on culture. And guess what's happened? They're thriving. Parents are begging to get their kids into that school because things are rocking. And Eric will say, one of the most important things I do every day is I stand in front of the school and I shake the hands of kids and parents every morning. That's the most important 30 minutes of the day because it creates a place where people say, I'm safe. I'm here to learn. If I make a mistake, hey, that's part of learning. That's how we get better.
At the you're talking about schools where parents want to send their kids. And at the beginning of the book, I think I recall you, I think it was maybe in a dedication where you gave a shout out to Ron Jones.
Yeah.
Up in Northern California. And what was it about, you said that you specifically wanted your kids to go to his school. What was it about his program, his school, his way of doing things that drew you to him and that the inspiration that you got from him?
You know, it was funny, Ron. We were looking at schools. We were going to move. We were in a really cool place in Colorado, but we said, hey, it's time to move. So we literally looked in Minnesota because they've got great schools, looked in Indiana, they got great schools. We looked in Portland, Oregon, and looking for great schools. We did a research, nothing private, just public schools. Where are they doing great things around what it felt like? Because my kids were going to do fine academically wherever they went. They were not going to be straight A, but they weren't going to be struggling there because of the culture of our home. But we knew Del Oro because I'd been there a number of times, and it was because there was a feeling on campus that the teachers were collaborative. They'd had a crisis a couple of years before. I checked in, how's it going? And Ron said, Phil, the way teachers are coming together to support each other is amazing. They lost a teacher to cancer, and the way the staff and the students came together, I was like, I want my kids to feel this. I want my kids to be part of something where people don't want to leave. I mean, it's funny because now, you know, that was 15, 16 years ago. Now I will mention that school's name when I'm traveling and people come up to me and they'll say, I went to that high school. I loved it. You know, I had a guy about a year ago in a faculty meeting I was doing in Central California, probably 4 or 5 hours from this school. And he came up, he says, to tell me the truth, is the school that good? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, my college roommate went there and he always bragged, Del Oro is an amazing school. And he says, he's the only one I've ever heard that from, but he said it all the time. And I was like, for my family, it was excellent. It was a great place because when we left after our 3rd kid graduated, we still wanted to go back. We went back to other people's kids' games because we wanted part of it. It's not the same. The emotions are different because our kids weren't playing. But there's a feeling that people say, you know what? I like it here. This is a good place. Academics are strong. Activities are strong. Athletics are strong. It's a nice balance.
My next question for you, and Phil, you're doing great, by the way. Thank you very much.
You bet.
You talk about the difference between mission and vision, and I've always had a little bit of trouble identifying the difference between mission and vision. Maybe others have as well. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between the mission of a school, the vision of a school, and I know you gave some examples in the book. Why are both important? Why do schools need both a mission and a vision?
I'm going to jump to the side to answer that first, and I'm going to say this. In my research, I thought, okay, we're going to start with the vision as the first chapter. And after doing interview after interview after interview, I kept hearing from people, don't tell me another vision. They said, if you knew how often we had a school leader, whether a superintendent or principal, stand in front of us and tell us the vision, and it was almost like a blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, well, wait a minute, why? And they said, because they were fired up. They went to a conference. They got some great ideas. But they said, how long does it come down to me, the actual teacher standing in front of my 35 kids in a class? Or a kid saying, what does it have to do with me? And I actually heard a guy say to me, he wasn't even an educator. He was at one of our school culture conversations. And he works in education, but he comes from the professional world. He said, show me what you're going to do, and then share with me how that works. And I thought, wait a minute. He says, if I can trust you and I believe in what you're doing, I'm going to follow you all week long. But he says, if you're standing there telling me what you're going to do, I have to sit back and wait. He said, I've watched schools have 3 principals in a 5-year period, all come in with a vision, and we never saw it happen. And so, to tell you the truth, Ron, when I wrote that chapter, June and I were struggling because, yeah, the vision and mission, so often they're on paper. And how many times have we sat in a faculty meeting, we worked for hours or days to try to get the wording right. If you want to know the vision of your school, go talk to a kid and say, hey, what's this school really about? Go ask a parent who's sitting in a junior or a senior event and say, what's this school really about? And just listen for a minute. And they'll tell you almost in a paragraph. And they'll tell you what the school's really about. I'm just wondering how often an educator has the courage to do that, to go sit and where the parent doesn't know who they are or the community member who uses that school on a day-to-day basis to say, hey, what's this school really about? And you'll hear it, because that's how you always find out who the coolest teacher is on campus. I'll ask kids at lunch before they know I'm the speaker. I'm in the morning. I say, hey, guys, tell me the 3 best teachers this school. They're, and they'll get so excited. They'll tell me the names. And then I'll say, what do they do? And it's all about relationships first. Every single time. It's the teachers that spend the time in a relationship. So, if the vision of the school is, sure, with the 3 R's, rigor, relationship, relevance. Yeah. Am I quoting Bob? Yeah, Bob Benson, of course, and who knows who Bob Benson, but it does. It comes down to that. And I don't know which one's in first, rigor, relevance, or relationship, but they're all really important. So there's going to be anybody in the world can tell you a lot more about mission and vision than I can, but I know, let's see them lived out.
Yeah, well, I know you mentioned Bob Benson. During the time when I worked under him at West Ranch, relationships always came first, and it was relationships, rigor, and relevance. And we sometimes argued about whether it was rigor or relevance second, but relationships always came first. So I actually wrote this question down twice. So I guess it was important for me to ask you this. Let's say that there is a school and they feel like they're struggling. They feel like they're underwater. Where does a school administrator start? Where do they, what's the first step if they're feeling like so overwhelmed? Where's a good place for them to begin to build, build up this, to build up their school culture?
I'm going to answer that with 2 answers. I'm going to quote John Ike. If you're into education, listen to this. Follow John Ike at Twitter. He's John E-I-C-K. John is J-O-H-N. John turned a school around that was toxic, that was hurting, that had so many issues, a gang school, some violence, some issues. And I said, John, how'd you do that? Where'd you start? Because I spoke at the school. I caught there a little bit nervous, and it was amazing. But what he did before he ever introduced me was he stood in front of kids. There are probably 1,500 kids on one side of the bleachers. He pointed at kids. He said, I saw you yesterday help a kid across the street when they were in the crosswalk. They dropped their stuff. You helped them pick it up, got them across the street. Another kid, I saw you stop and say thank you to the lunch lady. I said, John, he said, Phil, start with celebrations. He said, find anything and everything that kids, staff, administration are doing right and catch them doing that. And then people get the sense of pride that I want to be here. I want to be here. He said, Phil, I went into my faculty. He said, I had to take over a school middle of the year as assistant principal. Principal went on emergency leave. I went in and said, guys, let's just find anything that's happening right. He said, we did a student store and found anything that we could. Pencils, erasers, mugs, stuff that no one was going to buy. And the kid would do something, we'd hand him a pencil. Thank you. You're a Nighthawk. Give him a sweatshirt. All of a sudden, kids start wearing that stuff. All of a sudden, kids start going, I'm part of this school. And they became something they were proud of. And he said, I started pointing them out anywhere I could, in front of their friends, anywhere. He said, so we started with celebrations. And he said, the other thing, I think that school leaders have to realize that the health of a school is a reflection of a relationship among the adults. Roland Barthes said that really clearly. I quoted him at least once, maybe twice in the book. And he said, it starts with the relationship with the staff. And if the staff is unhealthy, there's no way, the kids are just going to do the best they can. And I think that's what drives people to silos, is because they're like, I don't want to go to the faculty room. I don't want to go to faculty meetings. I'm going to go to as few things as I can, and I'll work my best. But if you create a healthy community among the adults, guess what? The kids will take care of themselves. Marriott's hotels learned that 20 years ago. I was reading about article about them. They said, we take care of our employees, they take care of the guests, and it's worked brilliantly. Same thing in education. I think those are the two things: is start celebrating, and number two, take care of those adults.
You mentioned the word silos, and that was another thing that I found here in my notes. Can you explain? I'm trying to reference things without, if people haven't gotten your book, I want them to go out and get your book.
Yeah,
I don't want to give everything away, Phil, but
right.
But you talked about silos. Can you, in the book, you talked about silos. Can you explain what are silos at a school, and how can we avoid the pitfalls of those silos?
Well, it's funny because as I started to do the research, I would hear these terms and then I'd mention them to other people. And I had administrators that never heard the term silos, but sometimes they call them caves or bunkers. It's a situation where somebody doesn't feel connected with their colleagues, and so they just stay in their classroom. They eat lunch in their classroom. They show up. They might go by, grab their stuff out of their teacher mailbox, sign in, and they go to their classroom. They spend the whole day there. If they have a PLC that they need to go to, or a faculty meeting or a department meeting, they'll show up for that at the last minute and leave as quick as they can. But it's not just in schools. I think it's a reflection of our culture today. I talked to a guy recently who works in the healthcare profession, and I just said something about, do you eat with your colleagues? Oh, no. He says, I go out to my car, I read my paper while I have my sandwich, I take a nap for about 20 minutes. I'm like, every day? He said, oh, yeah. And I asked someone else in another corporate situation, they said, oh, yeah, we eat in our cubicles, or we go. So this is happening culturally all over, because I think a lot of us just, our friendships are on Twitter or on Facebook instead of the person in the classroom next to us. Well, as I started discovering that, I realized how many people are just miserably lonely. And then you talk to some of the teachers who've been around for 25 years, and they say, wait a minute. The nature of education, kids are needy. We're pouring ourselves out to them. One guy joked, he said, they kind of suck us dry a little bit like a vampire. Not in a bad way. He was kind of smiling, but he says, we get our energy from each other, from the teachers who come along and they pat us on the back. They cheer us up. There's a joke in the faculty room. Mark England, who's at Fleetwood Park up in British Columbia, he said, last year I was teaching 8th grade English for the first time in like 8 years. He said, I was struggling. And so the guy next to me in the lunchroom said, what's up? He told him, he says, well, give me 15 minutes. I'll give you a few tips. He said, 15 minutes later, I was so excited. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that. I remember that. He said, I was ready for the next 3 weeks. And all that cool stuff that happens when we come together. But I think a vice principal in DC, Washington, DC, called me about 2 months ago, and she said, Phil, we keep hiring rock stars. They're superstars, but they also become lone wolves. And they just, like, for them to be excellent, they just want to do their own thing. Don't bother me. I'll do my own thing. And she said, so what we've done is we've created this culture where people just think, leave me alone. I'm doing fine. And they're miserable. They're alone. And they're missing so many great things that happen when we collaborate.
And you mentioned that too. You talked about the lone wolf and how they're, they could be a rock star to their students in their classroom, but what good is it being a rock star if you're not sharing that inspiration with your colleagues? You're not being collaborative. You shared some really good ideas, and I want to ask you about a couple of them without revealing everything from the book. Lawn Chair Friday.
Yeah.
You mentioned in the book people who are on the Facebook page, the School Culture by Design, the Facebook page.
Yep.
Talk about it all the time. Can you talk about where did Lawn Chair Friday come from, and what is that all about?
Yeah, Amy Bessler is the principal now at Bear River High School, Grass Valley, California. A year or two ago, she was at Colfax High School on the way to Lake Tahoe if you're leaving Sacramento. And they were thinking, how do we get our staff together? And so Amy told Paul, the principal, hey, we should do Lawn Chair Fridays. And so they just told the staff, hey, bring your lawn chair on Friday. We'll just sit in a circle and eat together. And I think if I remember the first time, like 8 people showed up. Because, people are like, wait a minute, I don't want to be punked. I'm going to go out there. I'll be the only one. But Paul and Amy both went out there. And they sat there, and about 6 other teachers showed up. And so people peeked. They said it was kind of funny. People were like, oh, they did it. So a week later, they showed up again. About 12 or 15 showed up. And the third time, almost the whole staff showed up. They're laughing. They're sitting around. Well, what's been really cool about that is now we're better together. We know that. But I think I love this concept of play, trust, learn. If I play a little bit, I learn to trust you. When I trust you, then guess what? I'm ready to learn from you. So what's a great way to play together? Let's eat together. We laugh, we tell jokes, we have a good time. Well, I visited Roseville High School near Sacramento a year ago, very first day of school. I did a couple assemblies. I walk out at lunch, and guess what happens? I see about 75 adults sitting in lawn chairs in 3 different areas. I'm like, what's going on? I said, just lawn chair lunch. So they didn't call it lunch chair Friday. There's just lawn chair lunch. And I was watching the teacher laughing and joking, sharing stuff. Someone forgot their food. Everybody's, oh, I got enough, and created a buffet. Well, what does that do to a staff? It's like, wait a minute, that's basic. We love the fellowship that comes from eating together. So guess what? This group's up here, because if you get too many people, you can't talk to other people anyway. And I was like, Amy Bessler, what a great idea. So that's where that one came from. And it's been fun to watch it around the country as people start going, hey, pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to, in a little bit later on, I'm going to ask you about a couple of other ideas of yours, but I wanted to switch gears a little bit. And towards the end of the book, you talk about seeking student voice. You are, obviously we're talking a lot about how important adults are in transforming school culture and the relationships that adults have with each other. What is the role of seeking student voice in transforming a school culture?
Well, I think if you asked me a few minutes ago, how do you start with the toxic culture? Start with celebrations. You start with the adults. If some of you are like, I don't have a toxic culture, but I have an okay culture. And so, or some of you even like, when you were at West Ranch, it was a really good culture. And I think what you guys were doing at West Ranch was, how do we go from really good to even better? Well, to go from bad to good is pretty easy. Good to excellent, that's a little tougher. Excellent to maintain it, that's what Antelope High School in Sacramento is doing. They're like, hey, we got this good thing going. How do we get better? That's when I think we really start to talk to students. One of the cool ideas I heard one principal say, he says, I just go out about every 2 weeks and just give out a little invitation to about 10 kids. Say, hey, please meet me at my office tomorrow or whatever it is, and I want to invite you for pizza lunch. And the kids walk in, and there's 3 or 4 large pizzas. There's Mountain Dews and waters around, and they just talk. And they say, hey, what's going good at our school? If you could fix one thing to be a little bit better, what would you do? Because kids, they can fill out surveys all day long. They're used to that, bubble this, bubble that. But he said what happened was fascinating. Those kids weren't really sure what to talk about. And there was always 1 or 2 kids that were more talkative. But what he thought was really cool was, he said, the next time I'd invite 3 of those kids that I knew had something to say, but they weren't talkative, to come back. And I'd invite another 6 or 7 kids. Well, the kids who were there the second time got what was expected. They had a sense of anticipation. They were much more talkative. So he said, I started doing that. Every time I'd bring repeat kids, and it would drive the conversation. He said, we got feedback one time, an assistant principal, I said, tell him to smile more. And he's like, well, what do you mean? He says, that guy's the nicest guy at the school. He says, every time we see him, he's moving across campus, he's got this frown. Well, what they realized as assistant principal, he was always moving place to place really quick, and his brain was processing. Well, what the kids saw was his frown. And the guy said, that guy learned. I walk out of my office, there's a smile on my face. All of a sudden, kids started approaching him different. And he's like, all of a sudden the kids are like, yeah, he's easier to talk to. So when we start to ask kids, what are you seeing? It's real obvious. And sometimes they see stuff that are kind of like our blind spots. Tyler Derman always talks about, what's your blind spots? Well, for us to go, what are our blind spots? The kids see it. They can go, what about this or this? Hey, do you know this isn't fair? Or have you ever thought about this? And sometimes we do that with our leadership kids. But how often do we just grab a group of kids and say, hey, what are you seeing? What should we never change about our school? What could we fix? And just listen. Because the kids, they'll tell you, they're honest, man. As soon as they know that you're for real, they'll tell you quick.
That makes me think of seeking feedback. Makes me think of another thing I wanted to ask you about. You referenced Tim Lyles. I think maybe Tim Lyles is an author talking about creating a culture of growth. Which made me think of growth mindset. And
yep. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what the importance is of creating a culture of growth at our schools?
Yeah, Carol Dweck, many people now are familiar with her work out of Stanford. The growth mindset's brilliant because you're either going to have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And that's what's interesting. I work with staffs a lot, doing staff development, community building, and their schools I walk away and just, they got a fixed mindset. It's going to be tough. But man, Tim Lyles, he's a principal at Sunnyside High School in Fresno. And I think they're about 95 to 100% free and reduced. They go home with some tough stuff. They love coming to Tim's school. And Tim, I've known Tim about 20 years, and I don't know that I've seen someone who's been as diligent as Tim over those 20 years of growing, of learning. He was an activities director when I met him. They hired him away from his school at that time to become the campus culture coordinator for the entire district. And then he became a middle school principal, then a high school principal. And the conversations Tim and I have had over the years, and it's always, Phil, oh my gosh, I learned this the hard way, but I got this figured out. And it's fascinating to hear Tim talk about that. And it's always fun. We hear the principal's supposed to be the lead learner at a school because that develops growth mindset. But Tim really is. Paul Lumberg's another guy. Paul is a principal at Colfax High School. Last year, snowboard accident, broke his back. He was out of school for maybe 3 months. I said, Paul, what'd you do? He said, Phil, I listened to podcasts, I was on stuff. He said, and those are evidence of people who are getting better. There was an old quote years ago, when you're green, you grow, when you're ripe, you rot. And these are people who are committed. Heather Galway out of Natoma School District, that woman is committed to learning. I just love being around these educators. Denise Vignatis in Tulsa, Oklahoma, every time you're with her, she's like, have you read this? Have you thought about this? It's fascinating to watch people who are like, they want to get better. So as they lead other people, people want to, they want to live with that. They want to say, I want to rise to that.
Phil, one of the things that I notice about you, I've noticed this before, and it's definitely coming out this evening, is you celebrate others. You talk a lot about the amazing things that other people are doing. Is that a trait that more of our school leaders need? Is this idea of celebrating others?
I celebrate others because I don't know much myself, Ron. I got to be honest. If you listen, everybody's like, Phil doesn't know nothing. He just keeps telling you stories about what other people are doing, and it's fun. It's what I love about what I do. And I think you're right. When school leaders, I'm not just saying administrators, I think teachers have to understand that administrators, if they're lucky, are going to stay there for 7 or 8 years, and they have to move on, whether they're going to go to a fresh school or move in somewhere else. So the teachers have to understand that, we're a critical part of this, and we need to lead in a really positive way. And I think when we all as leaders say, let's find each other doing stuff right, because this is a tough profession. We pour our hearts into it. And if someone else every once in a while says, you know what, that was brilliant. Oh my gosh, I saw the improvement. You're so much healthier now. Whatever it is, it validates that. When somebody says that helped me, and so whether it's the principal, you guys at West Ranch had that award that different teachers would celebrate each other. What'd you guys call it?
Yeah, it was the Apple Award. As a matter of fact, I've got the Apple.
There you go. Absolutely, and it's cool. So, and maybe it was your principal, but pretty good chance it was another staff member who celebrated you. So it's beyond the administration have to look for that. But it's as simple as this. I heard Kim Bears at Wood Creek High School in Sacramento last year. She said her principal, Jess Borhan, walked in during back to school night, and all the parents were there, and they're excited, they're nervous, and he stood by the door for a couple minutes, and she said, I want you to meet our principal. And he said, guys, I normally don't do this, but I want us. And he talked about what value Kim brought to their school. I think she said he talked for 2 minutes, and she said, I can live on that for a year. And he just quietly walked away. And she said, that was unbelievable. She said, it meant the world to me. So that little public validation in front of a group of parents meant the world to her. Well, so what if that had just been a colleague? It would have been the same, happened to be her boss. But I think if we can create a culture of that celebration, let's celebrate each other, because the principal can't get around. Tim at Sunnyside's got 158 teachers. He can't get around them all. He's got 5 administrators. I think that at Broken Arrow High School in Oklahoma, they have 1 principal and 10 assistant principals. They can't get around them all. So imagine if the staff says, let's do this together. Let's find a way to catch each other doing stuff right. it just creates this culture of, yeah, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to struggle, and our teammates are going to come support us through those. Man, they're going to pat us on the back on the good days too.
Yeah. Well, it feels good to be I mean, we all feel that. We all feel good to be recognized, and
So I have a question. Do you have two apples?
Okay, so there's a story. I'm not supposed to be the one talking; it's supposed to be you, Phil. But I will tell the story.
Yep.
So one of these, and I forget which one it is. One of these is the one that I got when I was at West Ranch, the Apple Award, and then the other one was actually I got so excited. I've been to a couple different schools here in my school district.
Yep.
And so I was so excited about the program at West Ranch that I had heard about. This is before I actually started teaching there. That when I was at Rio Norte Junior High School, this was the one that I got at Rio Norte.
Cool. All right.
So I was able to get it from a couple of different schools, and it feels good. It's nice. It's nice to be recognized by your colleagues. When they see that you're doing something good.
And I love what you did. This whole thing that CADA has taught us over the last years is beg, borrow, and share. You heard about a good idea. You came and made it work for your school. That's what I'm hoping the listeners will do, is they'll take one or two of these ideas that we're sharing, whether it's in a book or in this conversation, and they'll go, we can make that work. They might have to twist it a little bit to make for their school. But the idea is, how do we live in a world of beg, borrow, and share? In the world, that's why Twitter's so good, because we can get ideas from anywhere in the world, make it work on our campus. So if you're listening right now, you got to find a way on Twitter. Somebody like, I don't have time. 5 minutes a day. Just tweet something cool that happened in your classroom and watch for something else, because we get better together, not just on our own campus, but all over the world.
And that's my next question, is regarding the role of social media. How do you talk about that in your book as well? What do you see as the role of social media in building a more positive school culture?
Well, first thing I got to say, Kim Carr and Matt Soeth have created this thing called hashtag I Can Help. And it's brilliant. They're working with kids on responsible citizenship around digital citizenship. And it's brilliant. If you don't know what it is, go back, take a look at hashtag I Can Help. But I think for teachers, I just heard of a district that just said no cell phones at school all day. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, folks, we want to be innovative. How many of you adults can go a whole day without looking at your cell phone? We don't do it. Sometimes it's just as simple as where are the car keys? And we need to answer that question. The 17-year-olds, oh, Mom, I put it in the drawer. And it saves a lot of issues. But I heard a teacher the other day that says, I have my kids take a picture of the homework. They just walk by as they're going to class. They take a picture with their phone of the homework on the whiteboard. They don't have to write it down. It's, well, why would we not do that? That's the world we live in today. We're not in 1997, and so I think one of the cool things, and I like to do it in my staff development programs, is have people talk about how do you use social media in the classroom, and yet how do you create a culture where the kids say, well, let's hold each other accountable. Hey, wait, we don't do that at our school. We don't talk bad about people. We don't do that stuff. How cool is it when you have a kid look at another kid and say, nah, we don't do that here. That's not cool. And around social media, that's huge for kids to block each other out. I think one of the stories that Kim tells and I Can Help is that if all of a sudden there's some junk going on, they just do this massive blast of all these positive things, and then the negative stuff just gets hidden. So if we as educators can find all the great ways to use social media, then the things we're worried about eventually become irrelevant. But I've heard teachers that say, the kids use their cell phones for tests all the time and quizzes and stuff. And it's to Google, because what did someone say? And I thought this was brilliant. With Google today, the kids have access to more knowledge than we can ever give them. What we bring is the wisdom because of our experience. And I think when we grasp that, we're going to get better and better.
All right, let's see. You've answered so many of my other questions already. Oh, this was the one question. Another question I had for you is about, I was going to ask you about some of your other favorite ideas, again, without giving too much away. What are, and besides Lawn Chair Friday, Lawn Chair Lunch, which I'm going to get started right here at Sierra Vista Junior High School. I'm excited about that. what are some other really great ideas for teachers, school leaders who are just getting their brand new school year started? And I want to, within the next week or the next couple of weeks or the next month, whenever they're getting started, I want to get this going. What are some other great ideas that you want to share with educators?
Well, today is August 10th. So some schools started today, last week. I got schools that don't start till Labor Day. These Canadian folks, man, they're smart, man. They wait till summer's almost over. But so who knows when someone might listen to this, but I was doing a brand new teacher training last week. I had 25 brand new teachers to this district, and I was telling them, get on Twitter, and someone's raised their hand and say, Twitter's cool, but the best connection right now is Pinterest. And I was like, really? I thought Pinterest was like decorating all that. No, they said all these super cool ideas are on Pinterest. So first thing I want to say is get on Pinterest, go to the education stuff, and you're going to get more ideas you can possibly ever use, more than I can give to you right now, because you can put in what you're looking for, how to decorate your classroom, how to greet kids the first day. That being said, let me give you 2 or 3 things I've learned even since the book came out. Because, I did the National Student Council Conference a couple months ago in Portland, Oregon. I had advisors for 3 hours. And I just said, what are you guys doing to welcome new teachers? And that's a big thing, because I had a school call me last week from Minnesota. They got 35 new teachers this year because they're going from like a 10-12 school to a 9-12 school, or they're doing something. And they're like, how do we do that? So one thing is be real careful if you have people stand up in front of the whole school, because that's always awkward for everybody. But one school said, hey, what we do is figure out their favorite music. What's their favorite song? Have you ever been to a pro baseball game? What do? They always have the walk-up music. The batter's walking up, and they only play 8 to 10 seconds of it. That's the best part of that song, so the player gets kind of juiced up. Well, can you imagine this principal saying, ladies and gentlemen, coming to us all the way from West Ranch High School, now at Sierra Vista, Ron Ippolito, and ba 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 ba. You got to believe as a teacher, you'd be laughing, smiling, and then other people connect to you through that music, and maybe they have 3 fun things about you. Ron used to do this. He's taking his daughter on a tour of the country, whatever. And people are like, oh, and it gives the teachers something to go talk to that person later about, hey, wait a minute, you used to go to University of Arizona? So did I. What year were you there? Instead of just saying, hey, this is our new math teacher. Because most schools might have anywhere from 5 to 10 new staff members. So finding a way. Another thing, so first day of school, the first week of school is school color day, right? So all the kids wear red or green or something. What's that new teacher supposed to wear? I'm 23 years old. I'm in more debt than I could ever imagine, and everybody else is going to wear red. One guy said they just go to the student store and they find shirts that are 2 or 3 years old and that people probably aren't going to buy, and they figure out this guy's a large, she's a small, whatever, and they go give them 2 of those and say, hey, here's something to wear the first day of school or the first rally. One guy said, you know what they loved? One teacher said, thank you for giving me a homecoming 2014. He said, why? He says, because I don't look new this way. And they're like, we never thought about that. Another school said they did something really fun to welcome new teachers, was they asked them in some type of fun little survey, what's your favorite morning drink? Oh, I like an orange juice. I like a chai latte. I like Americano decaf. Well, how cool would it be about 5 minutes before school starts, 10 minutes before school starts, somebody walks into that class and says, hey, we're so glad you're here. We thought you'd like a drink to start the day. Can you imagine, Ron, if some kid last year when you were brand new at Sierra Vista walked in and said, I understand you like a chai latte, and put it there, you'd have a smile as big as Dallas going, this is cool. And it's just that another level to take that fear, that scared away. So those are a couple that I've learned in the last couple of weeks. I'm like, yeah. And some of you are like, man, we started school last week. How do we do this? Well, what if a week from now or 2 weeks from now, you go into that person, and they might even not be a new teacher, just new to the campus like you were. It's still nice to be recognized. It's still nice to be noticed. What if 3 teachers walk that teacher's classroom on a Friday and say, hey, don't bring your lunch. They walk in and have a little potluck, and the 4 of them sit down and they just talk about life, not about school, just about, and for 20 minutes, they sit in that teacher's room and they talk and they share stories. And so that's something you can do any time of the year that makes someone feel like, oh, cool, they know I'm here.
I love that. You see me frantically taking notes.
Well, I think you can go back and listen to this later, can't you, on YouTube?
Yes, it's gonna be on YouTube forever and always. And that dawned on me. I was like, you know what? I can replay the transcript. Phil, what what gets you, just kind of a personal question for you. What gets you fired up and excited about what you do, about your speaking, about your writing? What is it that drive you have this boundless enthusiasm and energy and love of life? What is it that drives that for you?
Ron, this is my calling. You know, there's plenty of people in the world, they have a job, they like it, they do fine. But every once in a while you find someone, they just love what they do. I'm lucky. I get to do what I love. And I get tired sometimes. I was on the road 8 days last week, speaking all over the place, loving it, had some challenging days. And yet, because you're asking me questions that are real, and I know if someone says, oh, I could use that, I may never meet them. But to know that something, little thing that I shared makes their life in their classroom or on their campus a little bit better. Same as a teacher. You guys know, you don't always know where it goes, but you might say something to that kid that causes them to go, I am good in math. I am good in history. I'm better than that. And causes them to believe. You know, Jose Guzman is a principal in Fresno, and he said, Phil, I want to write a book called The Walk Home from School. I said, why? He said, Phil, I grew up in a neighborhood where half the kids walked one way, the other half walked the other. The kids that went to the left, we all went home, did our homework, played catch in the park. The kids that went to the right, they broke into people's houses, they stole mail. They're all in prison or dead. He said the other kids, it was as simple as the walk home from school. I said, Jose, why did you walk that way? And he stopped, looked at me, he says, because I think I had parents that encouraged me, but he said, I think people at school just kept telling me that I could do this. I could do this. He said, look at me. I'm a principal of a school because people told me I could do this. Ron, I think that's why we're all doing it, because maybe if there's one little thing that I said in this interview, one thing that happened in a book, one thing in one of my presentations that causes someone to go, yeah, we're going to do that. And it shifts their culture just 2 degrees. And all of a sudden, they're better because of it, and people want to be at their school and don't want to leave, then that's what I get passionate about. And the other thing is, I keep learning from people. There's so many cool things going on out there all the time, but I'm like, I hadn't thought of that. And so I get fired up about that.
You made me think about something else, which was, I feel very fortunate because I have a good relationship with my administrators, with my principal, and I feel like if I had an idea, I can walk in and there's an open door and I'll be listened to. What would you say to the teacher who maybe doesn't feel like they don't have that open door relationship with their administration? They're not an activities director or in a position of leadership. How can they feel empowered to make a difference? And you've already talked about a couple of things, but how can the average teacher, the one who doesn't feel connected to the decision making, how can they make a difference on their whole campus?
Kristen Patton told me last week. I called her and said, Kristen, and Kristen's a rock star. She's at Antelope High School, and I called and said, I'm working with these brand new teachers. What do I need to tell them? And she said, Phil, tell them to be fully engaged. A lot of teachers hold back. I'll see what she says. The teachers who love teaching the most have the greatest impact. If you go to a school assembly, don't stand on a wall. Go sit up in the crowd with the kids, because 2 things happen. You enjoy the assembly better, but the kids see that. And what messages are you saying to them? And what are you saying to the activities director or the administrator who's hosting that? You're all in. You're in total support. If some people that might be listening to this might be working in very difficult situations, so create a classroom that kids don't want to leave, that they're like, I can't wait till we get back. Even if the rest of school's in chaos, what can you do? We all fall in love with those. Me and Jaime Escalante, Aaron from Riders, that's what they did. In really tough situations, they created a place where kids are like, I want to be here because this teacher cares so much. So in the classroom, create a place where kids know each other. They want to be connected. They want to learn. And then when you walk out of the classroom, have your chin up. Have your chin up and believe that, you know what, someone may see me and go, Yes, I want to be in your class. Or the teacher next door might say, the only bright spot I got is you. And you might be the only teacher that goes up and sits in that crowd because everybody else has drank the Kool-Aid of no, teachers don't do that. But when you do that, it's a place of total support. If kids see you dress up, and you don't have to dress up in this crazy outfit for a dress-up day, enough for the kids go, she dressed up, he dressed up. When you've got 15 minutes on the way home and you step into the gym and watch a few minutes of a volleyball game, the kids in your class see that. What are you doing here? I just heard you were playing. Well, I don't get to play much. That's okay. I just wanted to watch. Or maybe you stop by a band event. Maybe you can't go to the drama, the play tomorrow night because you have a family event, but you go by the rehearsal and you're there for 20 minutes. And someone says, what are you doing? Well, I just wanted to watch you guys. Oh, that speaks volumes. It speaks volumes on every level. And so maybe you're in a tough situation and you don't feel like you have a voice. Maybe your actions speak so loudly that your words don't need to be heard.
I love that. We know, those of us familiar with CADA, and I think most of the people who are watching this are CADA people know, but even for those who aren't, CADA is the California Association of Directors of Activities. We also, we have a student component to our organization, the California Association of Student Leaders. And so a lot of our job, in addition to supporting educators, adult educators, activities directors, and other adults involved in activities, we are involved in supporting student leaders as well and training them through our Castle events, our Castle Conference, Leadership Development Days, our leadership camps during the summer, which we were very, very fortunate, very privileged to have you this summer at our high school camps, Phil. So thank you very much for coming out. Similar question now, kind of leading into that, to the student who is feeling like they want to make a difference, and maybe some advice or guidance to student leaders, or maybe even students who aren't necessarily the student body president or the senior class president. What are some ways that they can, talking about that power of one, how can they as one person help to make a difference on their campuses?
I think it starts again with relationships. I love that quote. Request without relationships creates resistance. If I don't know you very well and you call and say, hey, will you do this podcast with me? I'm going to think, what am I willing to give up to do this? But Ron, first of all, I feel you're so genuine. I feel like I could trust you that this would go great. So I was willing to give up the time to do this. Well, it's the same thing. I think a lot of times kids in leadership ask other kids to help them, but in class also. So I'm this kid that just happens to be a good kid in a class, and someone says, hey, we need a work group. Either kids are going to go, she's going to help me get an A, so I want to be in her group, or I know him, I want to be in his group. So I talk to kids about the magic 4 that are available in every class that you can talk to without the teacher ever knowing it. The kid in front of you can lean forward and say, hey, you got a pencil? You can lean to the kid behind you and say, sure, I got one. You can turn to the kid to your right and say, hey, is this the right homework today? You look at the kid on the left and say, hey, I'm starving. You got a snack? And most of the time you can do that pretty quietly. So here's the question. What if I'm just this regular kid on a campus that I want to create a school that no one wants to leave? What if in every class I got to know the 4 kids around me? What if I just said, I want to get to know their name, when's your birthday, in some casual conversation? Well, think about this. So let's say I'm the junior class president. I don't feel like I have a whole lot of influence, but I'm a leadership kid. What if I went in my leadership class and just said, hey guys, what if the 30 of us did the magic 4 in every class? All of a sudden, we know those kids, so we're going to do a blood drive, or we're going to do this event that includes senior citizens in our community, and we need some help. Well, guess what I do? I go to my first period class. I nurse the kid on the right. Hey, what are you doing Friday? Nothing. Why? What's going on? Well, we're going to play ping pong with the senior citizens at the senior center across the street. You want to do it? Kid said, yeah, that sounds cool. All right. So then I look at the kid on my left. Hey, we're going to do this ping pong thing, and we need a couple people who will help serve some food. We're going to take some snacks. Would you do it? No, I don't have time, but you should ask my sister because she loves that stuff. All of a sudden, through those relationships, you have an expanded impact. So I don't think you have to be elected kid. I just think you have a kid who says, I got relationships with people. So start small. Start with the kids.
I love that. I love that. It's we as teachers we sometimes call them clock partners. Your 12 o'clock partner, your 6 o'clock, your 3 o'clock, your 9 o'clock, and typically when I've used that in the past, it's talk with this partner about whatever it, and never thought of using it as a networking tool as well. I love that. All right. Going back to I've got about 3 or 4 different sets of questions going on here. Where do you see, and I'm looking at our time here, we got 5 minutes left. Where do you see, what's your, if you could kind of like look into a crystal ball and see what is the future of us building relationships, what's your I don't know if this is even coming out right. What do you see as the future of relationship building? What's the next big thing? Where do we, those schools that really want to make an impact, that really want to make a difference, what's the, am I even asking the question? Is this making sense?
It is. Yeah, it's my fear is that people are going to see this as a phase. I've believed in the power of story for 30 years. I created Link Crew, I don't know, 30 years ago to get seniors connected with freshmen. If you're listening, you don't know what Link Crew is, go to Link Crew, LINK. I'm no part of that anymore, but Boomerang Project, some amazing people have mastered it and doing programs all over the world. I created Breaking Down the Walls 25 years ago. It's all about people hearing each other's stories. So this isn't anything new. My fear is this whole story thing is a big deal right now. And I'm afraid people in the next 2 or 3 years are going to look past it. But the truth, it's always been important. And I hope that school culture isn't a phase in education, because the people who know how important have always done it. They've always had success. H.D. Waddell, who was principal of the year 2 years ago in the state of Oregon at Bend High School, he said, Phil, it starts with relationships. If we get relationships first, everything falls after. He says, the reason I was successful is because I spent time getting to know people, making it safe for them to come to me. So I hope this isn't just a passing phase. I just hope that people understand that when we start to have great relationships, we can start to have those fierce conversations. Because the truth is, right now in education, we need to have fierce conversations. Because if, as Catherine Scott says in her book around fierce conversations, that's when we get to the real stuff. Because Ron, most stuff we talked about tonight was building the first base. The second base is, how can we get to a place where we have those fierce conversations where, as Jim Collins says in Good to Great, we can have an autopsy without assigning blame. So we can say, this is our issue. Instead of saying it's your fault, your fault, your fault, we can say, this is the issue. Let's figure it out and let's move on. And so I think if people understand building trust is just step one of culture, getting to a place where we can use that trust to have fierce conversations. Is that really best for kids and their families? Because education is not just about the kid, it's their entire family. And so when we can do that, then what happens is we can go to step 3 where we say, now let's have real change. The stuff that's hard, that says we might not do 8 to 3 o'clock anymore for education. We might not send every kid to college. Whatever those conversations become. But right now, we're afraid to have those because people are afraid of the fierce conversation. So that's what I'm hoping.
When you were talking just now, it reminded me of a quote, and I don't know who said it, and I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like, change doesn't mean that yesterday was bad. It just means that tomorrow can be better.
Yeah.
And that really, wherever I heard that in some conference long ago, that really resonated with me. Phil, I'm noticing 1 minute left. Fierce conversations. I've heard them as courageous conversations. I think that's kind of the same thing. Yep. Real quick in our final moments, what's one fierce conversation that we need to be having in our schools right now?
What are the unmentionables? Trevor Connor from British Columbia said, Phil, what are the unmentionables? What are the things that no one can talk about, but they're happening and everybody knows about it? And when we have that conversation, we're going to get real.
Wonderful. Well, Phil, I'll give another plug for the book here.
Thanks, Ron.
Since it was it made such a difference in how I looked at education. The book is called School Culture by Design. Phil Boyte is the author, and Phil, I know that I got it on Amazon. Is that the best way to get it? Is there another way to get it? What for those people who have not yet read the book? What's your recommendation?
Amazon's great, or just go directly to our website, philboyte.com. Will get you to learningforliving.com to find out about the book, our programs, me presenting at your school. Either way, the deal, we want people reading the books. That'd be awesome.
Wonderful. Well, Phil, thank you so much, and you've been such a good friend of the CADA organization for so many years. So thank you for all that you've done for all of our schools here in California, all of our leadership programs here, and thank you for being that friend. Oh, let me get the quote here. Requests without relationships meets resistance.
Right.
So thank you for not resisting when I asked you to do this. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Phil.
Fantastic, Ron. Thank you.
All right. And folks, thank you for joining us. And if you want to check this out again, it's going to be right on that same YouTube channel, that YouTube page that you pulled up, so you can watch this forever and always. And thank you so much for joining us on our very first ever CADA book chat. Have a great evening. Thank you.